In a world where it seems totally normal to listen to a podcast about the Toronto Argonauts, it's the X's and Argos podcast.
Welcome to the X's and Argos post-game reaction podcast brought to you by Funny Bone Broth. My name is Ben Grant, joined as always by JB. And there is some celebrating today because not only did the Argonauts beat the Hamilton Tiger Cats for the third time this season, this one 31-12, not even close, and it really wasn't close all game. They have now clinched first place in the East. It assures them of a first-round bye in the playoffs, and it means that the road to the 2021 Grey Cup must go through Toronto. And not only that, they remain undefeated at BMO this year. They have an 8-game winning streak at home dating back to 2019. It was a perfect day for the Toronto Argonauts. And JB, just before I bring you in here, I feel like I got to steal a bit from the Argos fan cast. I got to just crack open a beverage. That is one of their traditions, and shout out to the guys at the Fancast as I have a sip of a celebratory beverage here. JB, how are you feeling right now?
Yeah, I mean, I always thought of Tuesday as the day that Toronto takes its trash out, but apparently Friday is also garbage day.
Beautiful, well said. Everything about this game, there was never a moment like from the opening, I guess the opening Toronto drive didn't go that well offensively, but you could sort of see already defensively, they were pretty dialed in. There was a very clear game plan from both sides of the ball. But I want to go back even before that, just, but as the game's getting started, the stadium was pretty full compared to what it's been all year. There were a lot of Hamilton Tiger Cats fans in the stands. It made for an electric atmosphere because, as I've talked about on this podcast before, the Toronto fans that are at the games, even when there were only just over 6,000 people there on a Wednesday night a few weeks ago, it's still a really good environment. Those fans are the loudest people in the city. And when you add the loudest people in Hamilton to that combination, it really made for an interesting environment. Like early on, it was intense. It really felt it. And then, match that to the fact that it's a night game and the weather and it's for the East title. It was a really cool environment. So, that overall, I think, really set the mood for what was going to be an amazing night, especially if you were an Argos fan. So let's talk about the game plan early on. It looked like the Toronto defense came out super aggressive. Were you worried about some of those bombs that you kind of thought we would see? Were you worried when you saw them going to that cover zero look and knowing that they were going to just bombs away?
Well, yes. I was, they were doing a lot of first down bombs, but full credit to the secondary. They were ready. They were in position. They stayed on top of their receiver. They played through hands. I mean, that's the way you do it. I mean, you should be able to play deep balls in man coverage, and I think that is really an absolute, moment of recognition for the secondary, because those guys went out there and balled out. Be able to go out there and cover those deep passes in man coverage is really fantastic work. So I was worried, but man, really happy to see the guys play so well in the secondary.
And I know I had a lot of Hamilton Tiger Cats fans on Twitter saying to me the Argos got lucky because they just couldn't connect with those deep balls early on, and if they'd connected, then it would have been a different story. But the reason they didn't connect was, like you're saying, the play of the secondary, but also that's what happens when you send a zero blitz. You've got Jeremiah Masoli throwing off his back foot. Every single one of those deep balls in the first quarter were Masoli throwing off his back foot, and so you're not going to get an accurate pass. So it's not just like a fluke that these passes are falling incomplete. It's because he's under heavy duress and because the secondary is largely in pretty good position. And how about that play from Jalen Collins? That was, if you were going to get a textbook textbook example of how to break up a deep ball pass. That bomb where he just reached out his hand at the perfect moment and was able to knock that ball away. I thought, when I saw him make that play, I'm like, this is the Toronto Argonauts like fourth corner who is in now. You take out all the guys that have been lost along the way due to injury, and there's Jalen Collins out there making just sensational plays. So, yeah, tip of the hat to the defensive secondary.
I mean, it was teach tape all night. I mean, they were calm. They were cool. They played through hands. They stayed on top of their receiver. And Hamilton, guys saying, if that had been caught, it would have been a touchdown. I mean, the Toronto defenders were ready, I mean, throwing deep passes on first down. We talked about it before the game. It was, that was their plan. It was like, that wasn't very hard to figure out, Hamilton.
And offensively, I thought Coach Dinwiddie had an excellent game plan. He seemed almost, when I talked to him after the game, he seemed almost surprised that Hamilton came out with exactly what he thought they would come out with, and it was what they prepared for. The game plan was, short passes, checkdowns, and he anticipated them having, quite a bit of cushion, which they were giving. So Hamilton was hell-bent on stopping the run, but they were going to give up ground in the pass. They just weren't allowing anything deep. But the entirety of the Toronto game plan, which was fairly simple this week, and Dinwiddie talked about that too, just how they really just had one practice this week, and the entire focus was those short passes connecting underneath. And that's what McLeod Bethel Thompson did really all the way through the first half, because you had such a cushion given from the Hamilton DBs. You had all hooks, quick little speed outs and stuff like that. And McLeod just kept hitting route after route after route underneath. And for a guy like him, that's not easy. It's not his favorite thing to do. He loves to launch it. But you got to give full credit to him for being patient and taking what the defense gave him and sticking to the game plan.
Yeah, he played a really good game. I mean, I'll get to more on him, later on. But, I thought Hamilton, not having Jackson at running back definitely hurt. It hurt. Not having him out of the backfield catching passes. He is a very good running back. That definitely seemed to take the steam out of that team, because they came in with this plan to throw the ball 50 yards down the field every time they got it. It was a very weird game plan, and they looked like the third best team in the conference, and I think the score reflects that.
Yeah, I can't argue with any of that. And I really don't know what the offensive game plan was for the Tiger Cats. Defensively, it was pretty clear, and it backfired. They were gambling that McLeod wasn't going to have the patience to endure taking the underneath stuff all day long, and that backfired on them a little bit. Now, they were able to stop the run, because that was clearly part of their game plan. Toronto couldn't get anything going on the ground in the first half. I think at the end of the half, I believe they had 19 yards on 11 carries. And I was kind of expecting Coach Dinwiddie to abandon the run in the second half, because we've seen him do that before. When the run isn't working, he sometimes will throw that out. And we've given him credit for that, because we both think that's the correct thing to do. Now, in this game, I didn't see it that way. I at halftime, I felt like they should keep pounding the ball, not only because the score was 14-0 at the half, but because I did feel like there was something there. I felt like in order to continue to stop the run, Hamilton would have to keep playing defense the way they were playing and committing all their linebackers to the run. And what that was doing was opening the pass. And so you keep running from time to time, even if it's not getting those yards, because you want to force Hamilton to stay in that defensive set that they were going out with. So I was glad to see he kept running in the second half. I thought that was, again, a really nice coaching move. I thought it was a great job coaching from the whole Toronto staff all night.
I mean, it seems odd to me. Like if we talked about OCDC. Like if I'm lined up against Toronto, like stop the run is not even on the second page of my game plan. That's clearly not how the Argos get their scores or their momentum or their energy or anything. So very, very odd choice to make. But hey, man, you do you, Hamilton.
So the first quarter ends with a 0-0 score, which we also talked about. We were right like a few times today, and that so rarely happens, JB. So 0-0 at the end of one. Second quarter, not too much early on. Boris Beatty has a 26-yard field goal. And then Tristan Decoux went down with what looked like a pretty nasty hit to the head. And I was starting to get worried at that point because, like I've said, there's so many missing players from the secondary. And Boateng comes in for him. And at this point, the weather sort of took a bit of a turn. Basically when it got to that 3-0 stage. And there's just a little note that I found interesting here. And this is, bad weather on grass is a whole different ballgame. And Toronto getting to play all their home games on grass really is a home field advantage. And I've come to understand that more and more throughout the season. But you really see it in the rain, because throughout that second quarter, the grass, which started off in really good shape, was not holding up. Suddenly there was a lot of mud on the field. Guys were a little slow getting out of breaks. And even just this little detail that I noticed, Toronto has these small plastic cleat boards. And if you haven't seen these before, a cleat board is basically, it looks like a cutting board, except that it's got a bunch of spikes on one side, and you just throw it on the ground and stomp all over it with your cleats, and it basically takes all the mud off so that you can regain your traction. And Toronto has a bunch of these. They're all over the sideline. Every time there's a timeout or a TV timeout, a stoppage, someone runs out with a bunch of these cleat boards. Everyone kicks the mud off their cleats. Hamilton had this 100-pound device made of metal with a handle that was designed to do the same job, except they only have one of them. And so you've got players that are lining up along the side of the bench waiting to use the cleat board. And then during timeouts, this poor soul has to try and carry this thing out to the timeout. By the time they got out there with it, the timeout's half over. So that one or two guys can clean their cleats, and then suddenly they have to run back with this 100-pound machine. And it was just an example of one team being prepared for the surface and the conditions because they play here all the time, and another team not. So that just stood out to me about mid-second quarter, and that's really when Toronto started taking over too. There was a great drive mid-second quarter to put Toronto up 10-0. That was the Antonio Pipkin touchdown, and we'll talk about this play a little bit later, I suspect. There was a huge penalty on the play where Santos Knox ends up getting ejected from the game. But what I want to talk about is going away from the quarterback sneak up the middle. We've talked before about, I know fans have expressed frustration, and we have too, about the inefficiency of Toronto's quarterback sneaks and how it's such a stressful moment for Argos fans and seemingly nobody else in the CFL. But a lot of questions I got were, why aren't there any running backs in the backfield? Why isn't there someone back there to either occupy a linebacker or to sort of buck block and push the quarterback over the goal line? And the reason why is the Pipkin plays that we saw today, where you have the option to sort of Cody Fajardo it and run around the outside. And Pipkin did that on a couple of occasions. And clearing out the backs allows you to do that. Suddenly you have numbers. If they're going to jam double A gap, if they're going to put guys all over the middle, then you can go outside, especially if you've got a seal block from your motion man, which they did. And so Pipkin got in easily for the touchdown. And he used that play later in the game as well for what was, I think, Toronto's biggest running play of the night. So that was a terrific drive, puts the Argos up 10-0 at that point, and it was just a huge momentum swing. A few seconds later, we've got Beatty kicking off from the Hamilton 50, which you just don't see very often. I was wondering if they might even try an onside there. They ended up kicking it deep. They get the rouge. It's now 11-0. JB, do you try an onside kick at that point?
No, I don't think so. I thought that, I just don't think the percentages are there for onside kicks. I would only go for one. Basically it's, as an absolute last resort.
I think you got a couple options there. I think you can do what the Argos did, which is boot it into the end zone, take the single. I think there's the option of really floating it and trying to get it to land at about the 5 and have so much hang time on it that your coverage team is right down there. Almost like a rugby restart, that sort of thing, where there's going to be contact almost immediately on the reception of that kickoff. And then the third thing you could do is the onside kick, which I like just because I like that sort of aggressiveness because you're already at the Hamilton 50. So if they recover, they're getting it at their 38. Well, they start at their 35 anyway. And I think sacrificing 1 point maybe it's worth it. Ultimately, it didn't really come into play in this game, but I do think it's an intriguing option when you have an opportunity like that. Like, I don't mind rolling the dice there. I wouldn't have been, I think I would have been pleased with Coach Dinwiddie's decision if he decided to go for the onside kick. But I can't criticize what he did. It was the percentage play, takes a single point, and it's 11-0 at that point. And then they managed to really control the clock well, which we haven't always been able to say for the Argos this season, especially lately. But they control the clock well. They have the ball right at the end of the half, and they're able to add a field goal right at the buzzer. It's now 14-0 Argos at the half. Argos fans are delirious. Ticats fans got very quiet at halftime. But what an amazing start to the game.
Yeah, it was everything you would hope for. I mean, I would love to have seen a quicker start in the first quarter, but halftime leads, you know, I mean, the stats just show it out. You got a halftime lead, you're going to win that ball game.
And especially 14-0 in a defensive battle with weather. And that was an interesting choice that Coach Dinwiddie had to make. So I feel like Hamilton really misstepped with their coin toss to start the game. So Hamilton won the toss. They elected to receive the kick. They didn't defer. They elected to take the ball because I think in their mind, I think they wanted to get up early and set the tone. But of course, that backfired badly. And now you've got Toronto with the choice in the second half. And Coach Dinwiddie after the game said that he considered briefly kicking off, like choosing side. And really thinking about taking the wind in the fourth quarter because there was a pretty noticeable wind coming from the south. It did impact the game. I don't know if it showed up on TV that well, but you could see balls that were into the wind did hang. Kicks were hanging up there. Passes were hanging up there. It was an advantage to be driving towards the north end. So he did consider it, but he ultimately decided it wasn't enough of a difference to give up a possession. And so they took the ball to start the third quarter, and that turned out to be a great decision because they went on this massive drive that took up over half of the third quarter. By the time Hamilton got the ball back, now it was only a field goal at the end. Their drive stalled at the 4-yard line on a play that seemed like a little bit of a miscue. I'll talk about that in a second. But to take up 8 minutes of the third quarter, you were already up 14-0. Hamilton's probably second guessing their choice to take the ball to start the game at that point. And now you're up 17-0 and time is starting to run down. And you haven't been able to get anything going on offense as Hamilton. Suddenly you're in a 17-0 hole. And we're talking about the later stages of the third quarter. I thought that was just a huge moment in the game. And that play, if it had been a touchdown there, I think that would have been it. That would have been lights out there. It would have been 21-0 at that point, and I think the game's over. It was a weird play. So McLeod Bethel-Thompson ended up rolling out to his left, and there was no receiver over to that side. It looked like he was expecting the outside receiver to run sort of a whip route, like start off inside and then cut back to the outside. That's what it looked like he was waiting for. But it never came. There was no one there, and he very sensibly threw it out of bounds. He was well outside the pocket at that point. He just chucked it out of bounds and took the field goal. But I thought that was a really mature play too. We've seen McLeod Bethel-Thompson in the past not necessarily be that responsible player that's going to take, throw the ball out of bounds instead of trying to make something happen. We've seen him throw across his body, throw across the field, really take a gamble. But that was a smart play. He throws it out of bounds. They add the field goal, and it's 17-0 at that point.
Yeah, it was an incredibly well-coached game. I mean, they went out there and they executed the game plan, and there was nothing particularly, flashy or lucky about the win. I think it was a fantastic professional victory.
Masoli did some pretty good stuff. Like, he didn't have a great game, but he responded well. The next two drives for Hamilton were all Jeremiah Masoli. There was still good coverage down the field from the Argos. There was still a lot of pressure, but he was able to buy some time, which he hadn't been able to do earlier in the game. He's using his legs. He was getting to the outside, and that was allowing his receivers to free up. So I was watching Brandon Banks a lot during that drive and just sort of seeing what he was doing. And there were times where he drew double coverage, where it was really good coverage to start. Masoli would then break the pocket, force one of the defenders to come up. Banks would come back to the ball, and Masoli would be able to make a play. But if he's not able to escape the pocket, if he's not able to buy that time, the receivers weren't open. So that was really on him. Now, it was huge, though, that drive resulted in only a field goal. I think if Hamilton scores a touchdown on that drive, cuts the lead to 10, they've got momentum. But kicking a field goal was it was a psychological loss for the Ticats at that point. 17-3 is, you're still down 2 majors at that point. We're basically at the end of the fourth quarter. And I thought that was a big win for the Argos defense to be able to hold them to just 3 points.
Yeah, I think, that was, I thought about that potentially as play of the game, the Chempong sack. I think it was, the D-line just absolutely made a fantastic stand.
The D-line was excellent today. They were double teaming Oakman quite a lot. You saw a center guard combo a lot on him. And so he still ended up making 4 tackles. He still got a few pressures in there, but it allowed everyone else to get after him. And while their stats maybe won't show up as much, like it's not like they had 10 sacks or anything like that, but they forced Masoli, like I said before, to throw off his back foot, to rush throws. They were in the backfield all night long. You know who else really stood out tonight, who I don't think had a great game stats-wise, but Shane Ray came so quickly around the edge today. He was really fast today. He looked like he had an extra step, an extra gear. He was covering on the outside. He was, especially when he was, to the boundary side, Masoli rolled out a few times and Ray was right there. Or there'd be a pass out to the back in the flats. Ray's right there, and he forces him to change his path. So he had another great game. I thought, in general, the defensive line, while it's not on the stat sheet, was outstanding today.
Yeah, I'm curious to see, if they're sitting on stuff. I thought the defensive line played really well, played pretty conservatively. They weren't not a lot of exotics, not a lot of stunts. I'm curious to see if they have another gear. I'm happy with how they're playing now. They're keeping stuff in front of them. They're keeping the run in check. They're speeding up the quarterback. But I am curious to see if they have another gear.
A lot of their exotic stuff comes from the linebackers. It sort of has all year, but really today too. They did line up a lot where linebackers would mug and then bail. They were confusing Jeremiah Masoli quite a bit, but you're right. It wasn't through stunts and twists. There were a couple. I think the Cordero Law sack, I believe that one was on a twist, but they just didn't have too much of that today. But they were able to generate pressure nevertheless. So you can't really argue with that. Now, in the fourth quarter, the Ticats changed up their defense a little bit. They had some guys banged up. They had to move guys around a little bit. And McLeod started to find receivers open on the outside, outbreaking routes from receivers that are already lined up outside. The Ticats were really playing with a heavy inside shade. And when they started running these outside receiver outs, outs from the X and the Z receivers, and McLeod's able to put the ball in, there was a lot of space for them out there. And he basically engineered this entire drive down the field, hitting guys to the outside. And then, of course, you had that highlight reel touchdown, the drive culminating with another throw to the outside against man coverage to Curly Gittens Jr., who catches the ball on the outside in space and makes maybe the best move I've seen all season. Just drops his defender on the ground with a shake to the inside, explosion to the outside, and he basically dances into the end zone from 5 yards out. That was a huge play, and that was coffin nails at that point. It's 24-3. Embarrassing the Hamilton defender at that point to go up by 3 full touchdowns. I felt for sure at that point the game was over. Hamilton, if they didn't think the game was over there, they definitely did after the next drive. Jeremiah Masoli ends up really engineering a pretty nice drive, but then he goes for a wide open Brendan Banks in the end zone, and the ball hits the upright. It goes off the upright. They have to settle for a field goal. I don't even know why you're settling for a field goal at that point. When the score is 24-3, I don't think that's an option. I think a third down, it doesn't matter what the distance is. If you're on like the 20-yard line, you've got to go for it. And I know there are other people saying that Masoli's got to run on that play because it was wide open for him. He could have run all the way down to the 5-yard line on that play where his pass went off the upright. But I think you've got to throw to your best receivers wide open in the end zone. I think you throw that every time. You're just you're not counting on hitting that upright. And so, we've seen that very same upright come into play before with Hamilton when their extra point went off that very upright to seal the win for Toronto just a few weeks back.
Yeah, I mean, that's bad luck, but, sometimes when you're not playing well, you don't get any of the breaks. That's kind of how the football gods roll.
And they missed the field goal too. That was the killer. So They don't even hit the field goal. It's a single, so it's 24-4 at that point.
Yeah, it's the Boris impact. Kickers crumble under his majesty.
And I do think there's something to that. Like, we've seen it too many games in a row now where I do think there's something. Boris, again, is perfect today. Another kicker fails. The fourth in a row, I think. And I think part of the factor here is that field conditions. You've got kickers that are coming in that never play on grass. They only play on turf. They only practice on turf. And they come into the stadium. Not only is it on grass, it's on wet grass. It's on mud. You're worried about your plant foot. You're thinking about other things. And that adds to the BMO home field advantage. So on the next Hamilton possession, was that a fumble, JB? Moamba looked like he forced a fumble from up in the press box. It definitely looked like a fumble to me. What was the call on that play? What happened on that play where he ripped that ball out?
It was clearly a fumble. And the TSN broadcast, I thought, nicely, threw some shade on it because they replayed the play with just audio and no commentary, and there was no whistle. So, they said that they called forward progress, but I mean, I guess the referee just thought about it in his head and didn't want to tell anybody. But you can't have forward progress called without a whistle, and there was no whistle. So those referees were reffing the score, which is the most common and the most irritating sin of referees.
And it did matter because on the very next play, Masoli goes to Brandon Banks. He goes out of bounds at the 1 yard line. Dane Evans comes in and quarterback sneaks it. I was highly confused at the decision to go for 2 at that point. They got it. So, I guess you can't really argue with it. But the score was 24-10. They go for 2 to make it 24-12. There's no math in my mind that can justify going for 2 at that point. To me, the going for 2 decision is a pride thing. At that moment, they obviously felt, to me, that this game was done. And they were just trying to get as many points on there as they could so that it was less embarrassing a pill to swallow. And I felt like that was, I don't know, I felt like that was, at that point, it felt like a misleading score, 24-12. But that went away pretty quickly when Chris Edwards finishes the game with a pick 6 to add an extra 7 to that tally. So it's 31-12 in the final. I think it was 2 seconds left at that point. One other play I want to talk about right near the end of the game there. It looked like the Argos were lining up to kick a field goal. It would have been not a huge field goal, not out of Boris Beatty's range, but into the wind. They end up going with a sort of quick punt instead, and that ball goes out of bounds at the 2 yard line. This was interesting because the officials were under the uprights. They were ready for a field goal. There was no one over on that sideline to try and gauge where that ball went out of bounds. And Hamilton was arguing that it didn't go out at the 2, that it went into the end zone.
Yeah, I don't know what the referees were. I mean, I don't know. I thought
it's a tough call. They're there.
I
for a
thought
field
Hamilton
goal.
was right. I thought those referees were like, I'm like, what? I don't think so. But I think they owed them for the blown fumble call.
Maybe so, but I've never seen that before where the ball judge came like sprinting over to the sideline well after the ball went out of bounds, and then he turned back towards the umpire and he shrugs. He's like, I don't know. I have no idea where it went out. And then he looked at the other guy and he shrugged as well. And so you could tell like we're kind of just guessing at this point because, and I guess it's not really their fault though, because they have to be standing under the uprights. If that is a field goal attempt, you've got to be there. So they're lining up in field goal formation, but that was kind of a weird one. And then, of course, the Chris Edwards pick 6. What do you think about Edwards' decision to take that all the way back instead of taking a knee? I do too. Just
always
because it's Hamilton. I think if that's another team, if you're playing Saskatchewan, you're playing BC, Edmonton, someone that you don't see all the time, I think you catch that ball as Edwards, you take a knee, the game's over. It's just one kneel down at that point. But this is your rival. You're clinching first place in the East. You're sending a message. You are, kind of avenging that last touchdown that really probably shouldn't have been on there because of that Moamba fumble call. So I love the decision to take it all the way back. 31-12 is the final. And yeah, there was a lot of celebrating there. So all in all, a pretty solid win for the Argos. When's the last time the Argos won this convincingly?
Um,
I don't know if they have all year. Like, is there another game all year?
the Winnipeg game.
Yeah, but Winnipeg came charging back at the end. They made it close near the end of the game. This was just.
I thought
this
was right there. I would say those were the two best wins of the year.
Yeah, I think so. And you were wondering who would show up today, and I think it speaks very highly of the Toronto Argonauts that they knew the pressure, they knew what was on the line. Everyone all week had been picking Hamilton. The CFL website, all the experts making their picks, every single one had Hamilton picked for a win.
I know. I mean, I can't believe that. I mean, we were down on how they had played the last two games. But I mean, we call it as we see it. I mean, if I thought Hamilton was going to win, I would have said it. I mean, there was no chance Hamilton was going to win. I mean, I don't know where people suddenly thought that Hamilton was really good. It was a very odd thing to think that Hamilton was going to come into BMO, where the Argos play incredibly well, and beat the Argos in a game for first place. It didn't make any sense to me at all. I mean, yeah, the Argos played poorly against poor teams, but they came away with wins. I never saw that as, the Argos falling apart or anything. Just, I don't know, it was very weird narrative-based, picking. And I don't want to throw those TSN guys under the bus, but I don't know how much Argos football they watch. So...
Yeah, that's those specifically are the CFL guys, but there's just a lot of people across the board were picking Hamilton today, no matter where they were.
Just because you sit at a desk doesn't mean you're watching the games.
It's true, and in some cases, you're actually not watching as many games. It's a bit more difficult to watch the games when you have a job like that. Like even the guys doing play-by-play and color commentary, you're watching basically one game a week because you're prepping for that game, and that's the only game you're watching. So you don't necessarily get to take in as much as a fan does, who can sit on their couch and watch every single game of the season if they want to. So I think there's a valid point there. But yeah, you and I thought the Argos would both win this one. I believe our preseason predictions are now a crazy 11-2, JB, which is nuts.
I don't know why they needed to. I mean, they could have just skipped the season and ran our simulation. I believe we had Winnipeg and Toronto in the Grey Cup, so we'll see.
Yeah, I think the only two we got wrong all year is we thought they would lose to Calgary to open the season, and they won that one, and we thought they would lose to Hamilton on Thanksgiving, and they won that one. And that's it. Everything else I think we've been on.
And so. I think, thankfully, we won't have to see Hamilton again. I think Hamilton's going to go to Montreal, and I think Montreal is going to beat Hamilton.
I think so too. And I think they've got a quarterback issue in Hamilton right now, because I wouldn't be surprised if half of that team thinks they've got the wrong quarterback out there. So just something that we may see take shape over the next week. And they've got a final game against Saskatchewan now. I wouldn't be stunned if you saw Dane Evans out there, because I think there's a lot of people pulling for him. So we'll see how that goes. I'm all for a quarterback controversy in Hamilton. Let's do our players of the game, JB. So offensive player of the game, where are you going with this one?
I've been really hard on McLeod Bethel-Thompson because I felt like he had given in to his more adventurous side and stopped being the efficient quarterback he was when we still had Arbuckle. And tonight was a return to that. I thought tonight was exactly who he should be. He was accurate. He played within a system. He didn't, he was careful with the ball. I know he threw a pick, but I mean, that's okay. I don't mind a pick or two. I just can't have 5. So I thought he played really well. I thought it was an absolute professional performance, and exactly, I don't want to say game manager, but, I would say that like a pretty good game manager.
It's not meant as an insult.
No, I thought he played within the system really well, and I thought it was a professional performance, and one really the kind of performance that made them find Arbuckle redundant. So it was great to see that he had that in him in a big game.
I love his stats today. 26 for 34. That's 76.5% completion. 250 yards, touchdown and a pick. That pick was a weird one. He was getting pressure. There was a free rusher, the field half blitzed, and he could see him coming. He kind of got hit as he was throwing. He ended up having to throw a little early, and it was before Daniels could really get his head around, and it ended up getting picked. But, aside from that, maybe he made one other mistake tonight?
Yeah, I mean, he's still a little loose with the ball, right? I mean, there was another run where he was being rushed and he threw a deep pass in the end zone that easily could have been picked. So, there's still stuff to clean up a little bit, but I would say he had efficient drives and he ran the offense well. And I can see why a coach picked him because, like, okay, here's a guy who can, stay on schedule and move us down the field and, we kick a field goal and then we come back to fight again.
My offensive player of the game is Curly Gittens Jr. I thought he had another one of his, and when hasn't he had a good game in the second half of the season? But today, 8 targets, 7 receptions, 72 yards, and then that highlight reel touchdown that I can't wait to watch the TV broadcast of because I didn't get to see a replay of it. I'm pretty excited to see that little sidestep that he did because it looked live. It looked like one of the best moves I've ever seen because I don't think the defender even touched him. And they're a few feet from each other, and he just jukes him right out of his underpants and walks into the end zone. So, yeah, Curly Gittens Jr., sensational game. He's my offensive player of the game. But, yeah, I can't argue with your picking McLeod Bethel-Thompson. Where are you going for defense, JB?
Some tough choices again, which was nice. I thought the defensive line played really well, and obviously I'm always a big fan of a Chempong, and I think like Gittens, he's I think they've really found themselves a potential star. But I'm going to go with Jalen Collins. I think that he is just a fantastic signing. He has NFL athleticism. He played in the Super Bowl. He obviously has the measurables, and every game he gets better. And he's on top of guys. He's using his ability to stay over the top on guys. He's calm on the deep pass. He's got good hands. I think he's absolutely turning into one of their best in the secondary. So I give it to him, and I think that's a huge development for the Argos that this guy is putting his. You never know when Americans come up. It's hit or miss, and I think they got another hit here.
The question is, what do you do when Jamal Peters comes back? Because Peters is a guy that we have raved about, and again, another discovery, another first-year American who's coming up here with a lot less fanfare than Jalen Collins in terms of his college career. But yeah, he was great all season. He gets hurt. They sign Jalen Collins, throw him in there. And he might be even better. I don't even know. They're both outstanding. What do you do at that point? Do you sit Tristan Deku and play Collins and Peters? But Deku's been really good too. So I don't know what the answer is there.
No, I mean, I think it's a nice problem to have. I think you probably just keep them all and see, go with the hot hand really.
For defensive player of the game for me, I'm going to go with Enoch Moamba. He was all over the field today. He probably ran about 10 kilometers in his total field coverage today because he was making tackles on the sideline. He was getting in the backfield. He was dropping back into coverage. He ended up with a huge statistical night, but I don't even think that does justice to the performance. 11 tackles tonight, but he was largely responsible for those nervous feet that we saw from Jeremiah Masoli early in the game. He was getting pressure when he was sent. He was really stuffing the run. Like he was single-handedly stuffing the run. And I know you talked about the difference when you don't, you don't have your starting running back fully healthy. It's a little bit different. not to say that, like, I like Sean Thomas Erlington. I actually think he's a good back, but it just wasn't the same as what you saw last time, both in covering, running back out of the backfield and in stopping the run up the middle. But yeah, Enoch Moamba did everything that was asked of him today and more, all over the field. Post game was pretty awesome. He had his little girl out there with him for the post game press conference. And I don't know if you remember back at the start of the season, there was a viral video of he and her, and he was explaining to her that he was now a Toronto Argonaut, and she was outraged and kept correcting him and saying, "No, we're Alouettes." And so in the post-game presser, I did ask him a couple of questions, but I asked her specifically, have you got on board with being a Toronto Argonauts fan? And they both laughed about it and said yes, that she has accepted and embraced the fact that they are now Toronto Argonauts. And she was wearing an Argonauts jersey, of course, number 10. And that was pretty cool to see. But yeah, perfect day for him to play like he did, to have his family there watching, to be able to carry his little girl to the press conference and sort of be the celebrated player that he was on a team that just clinched the East Division. So yeah, great night for Enoch Moamba. He's my defensive player of the game. All right, play of the game, JB. What was the best play of the game in your mind?
I think the play of the game was the Pipkin touchdown at the end of the first half. I think that it kind of capped off a really nice half for the Argos. I thought it was a great run by him to read that, to not just try and smash it up the middle, but to take it to the outside. I thought the energy that the team had after that score was fantastic, and it resulted in Santos Knox getting thrown out of the game, which, just, I think, deflated Hamilton even more. I thought that was a turning point in the game. I thought after that touchdown and ejection, I had no doubt the Argos were going to win that game. So for me, that's the play of the game.
I'm having trouble coming up with one specific play. I really like that Jalen Collins pass breakup. That stands out in my mind. There was an Enoch Moamba tackle that really stood out in my mind. But I think I'm going to cheat a little bit and not call it a single play, but rather a drive. The drive to start the second half, I thought, put it away. To be able to take 8 minutes off the clock, to be able to really shove the wrong decision that Hamilton made to take the ball in the first half down their throats and to come away with points. To me, I thought that was when the game ended. And so, you're talking about a play right at the end of the second quarter, and I'm talking about a play right at the beginning of the third quarter. It's around that same time. The game was over, and it was a combination of all of these things. So, yeah, my play of the game is that 8-minute drive, because it just doesn't happen a lot in the CFL.
Your play of the game was the third quarter?
My play of the game was the first half of the third quarter. So, or a little bit more than that. I know it's cheating, but you cheat all the time on these. You sometimes don't even pick like offensive players for offensive player of the game.
No, that's fine. I think choosing a quarter is, well, we could have a new one. We could have quarter of the game.
Half quarter of the game. All right. Well, JB, cheers to you and to all Argo fans out there. It was, and still is, a day to celebrate. We probably should sign off now, because I definitely have to get up in 3 hours to take my daughter to a swim meet, and it is the wee hours of the morning already. So on behalf of JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.